Welcome to the Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to New Normal, your go-to source for discussions on the gaming industry and key issues facing Native American tribes. I'm Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association, joined by my co-host, the brilliant Jason Giles, executive director of the Indian Gaming Association. Good morning, Jason.
Morning, Victor. How's it going?
I'm doing good. So
Yeah.
today we are discussing this recent court decision that we got on Monday, a federal court ruling that could reshape the boundaries of tribal gaming. On Monday, Judge Corley of the U.S. District Court of the Northern District of California denied the request by three California tribes for a preliminary injunction against prediction market operator for Kalshi. The decision allows Kalshi to continue offering sports events contracts on tribal land, raising major questions about federal oversight, digital wagering, and the future of tribal authority in online gaming. So, Jason, in a nutshell, my friend, let's discuss on what happened on Monday. Where were you when? The judge came back and said that she denied the injunction that the tribes were asking. They wanted to say that, they couldn't take bets on the tribal lands. I saw the hearing. The judge was talking. She knew about geofencing. She was very well informed. What can you say, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, at the heart of her ruling, she just didn't uh the tribes didn't in her mind didn't establish that nexus between IGRA and gambling on their reservation lands and what Kalshi and these other companies are doing with prediction markets. And the same uh ruling, she did say that Kalshi and these other companies may have found a way around prohibitions on interstate gambling that violate, state law. But when it comes to IGRA, she wasn't sure that, the tribes had enough nexus yet, really. And I don't know, no one knows what really that means. Do the tribes have to like find somebody on the reservation who was actively betting on Kalshi's website and then issue them a cease and desist order or some kind of violation? Do they need that kind of direct evidence that, somebody on the reservation somewhere is probably using these prediction markets? Uh, you know, so she's got a point. It is a way to sort of skirt around the issue of, IGRA conflicting with what the CFTC is allowing to happen now. So, and you're right, she was well informed about geofencing, but she's just not ready to go down that road yet, knowing that if she rules against them, it'll be immediately appealed on up and with very little evidentiary, in the record. There's not a lot of evidence in the right. These are all sort of legal, sort of I don't want to say theoretical because she acknowledges it's happening, but there's got to be a little more concrete evidence on the ground, and that's really where, look, if this was the state of Oklahoma doing this, they could just throw up the billboards and advertisements that Kalshi was stringing up and down Oklahoma during the NBA finals, as evidence that, look, they're right here advertising. They're seeking customers in our jurisdiction. I don't know that the tribes have that yet. And maybe we just have to look for other aspects of evidentiary, items that we can bring up for these courts to consider, and then start to establish that conflict between IGRA and the CFTC regulations. It doesn't mean that their lawsuit is, at this time wrong or anything. They just got to go back and reevaluate their pleadings, and just get a little more evidence-backed pleadings, I think, so that they can at least win these preliminary motions, and get to discovery. Now you're seeing in Nevada, and we've been told by our litigators that the discovery process in Nevada is a tooth and nail fight. And obviously, Kalshi and crypto, all these prediction markets do not want people to see what's happening behind the curtain because they're out there saying it's peer to peer. This is not sports betting.
The guy's
Yeah.
been lying since the moment he opened his mouth to us. Kalshi and Tariq. I think they said, we're not going to have any effect on tribal gaming. We're not going to affect the land-based market. And I told you, as soon as I was done with lying, I called up my friend Dustin Goker and I said, "Listen, nice guy, terrible liar." You know what I mean? 'Cause we knew everything that was coming out of his
Are
mouth.
you sure he's lying, Victor, though? Because did you see their new poll?
What?
90%, Kalshi had that poll where 90% of the people they surveyed know
Ninety
exactly
percent
what
of
prediction
Kalshi
market.
customers with the Kalshi poll is, oh,
Yes.
yes, I was having a field day with that over
Yeah.
the
Well,
weekend
it
on
looked like a
social
lot of
media.
people were because it was so blatantly just self-serving.
Well, you know what, you talk about a very important
Mhm.
issue that I keep picking up in here is that a lot of this is so new and there's no evidence in evidentiary, whatever you call it, that they can't rule and they're being safe. I guess that's what judges do is, you go with what is in front of you. And if the lawyer can't make the case, they have to go with what's in front of them. And right now it's really about the CFTC running this thing. And
Right.
because this thing is so new and it is so, I'm going to say hypothetical, even though it's in practice,
Mhm.
that it's theoretical, hypothetical, that they don't have answers for this. And I say this thing wasn't meant to last either. I saw a really profound quote right before I got on there. I believe it was Dustin that said it on social media. Dustin Goker that said, the financial industry is moving into gambling faster than the gambling industry is moving into finance. And I think that's a very, very profound observation, and I think a lot of these guys are moving into it. And we've discussed this before because this is where the quick money is. You know what I mean? That's why all the Wall Street guys, and it's another way, crypto is going up and going down, and they're still working that for the long game. That's the way you run those cons. That's a long game. And I think what we're dealing here is obviously is we're trying to find our way in, to where do we fit into this debate, you know what I mean? And the three tribes, which was Chicken Ranch, Chukchansi, and Blue Lake up in Central California, didn't have success in it, but it doesn't mean we won't have success later. We have to make a better argument. We have to do a better job of it. And I think what we were doing with sweepstakes is, we've been taking our expertise from state to state. We went to Minnesota, we're in the process of working with Wisconsin, you know what I mean? And I think that's what we have to do with prediction markets is start going nationally, state by state, and preparing everyone to start filing these lawsuits and looking for where our in is. But as Jason and I have said this many, many times, we believe when this goes to the Supreme Court, it's not going to be a tribal issue. It's going to be a states' right issue. So I think it's incumbent upon us to be as helpful as possible, you
Mhm.
know. And we're not alone in this. There's other people in the industry pushing back at this time, but for how long? You know what I mean? I think at some point, but this will keep being an unanswered question until it gets to the Supreme Court.
Well, and that's part of the problem here is which case, what questions, what legal questions will ultimately reach the Supreme Court and from what jurisdiction. And and just by asking that question, each one of those takes a year. So that's like 3 years of waiting for that to be resolved.
But
And
we have
then
7 generations. Don't worry
yeah,
about it.
okay, yeah, the long game.
Yeah, yeah.
We can
Forward
play
and
the
backwards, by the way.
so that's the frustration with this issue is however long this takes, these guys are going to keep trying to grow it, trying to push it, uh, and keep telling you, you know, a duck is not a duck until they're blue in the face, and that we're all just crazy and don't understand the future, is what their arguments come down to. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's a tough, right now. they're going to keep exploiting this all the way through into next year, where presumably they'll be more and more sophisticated. Now, what they can't prevent though is uh, customer uh, customers not being satisfied, or just customers outright losing money. And that you're starting to see that more and more, whether
Right.
how much of that is real or not, by people posting, I lost $8,000 on the
Jason,
Bills game.
exactly what
I mean,
happened in the UK, man. It's
right.
exactly what happened in the UK. You start seeing when we first started going to the UK, was 16 years ago, 17 years ago, there was a sports book on every corner and one in the middle of the block. So on some corners there was four sports books, you know what I mean? And at first I was like, oh, the sky isn't falling. Look, we can coexist with crazy gambling, but you started seeing those little chinks in the armor, the bankruptcies, the families, and it starts building and building. And I believe the industry is moving at a lot faster velocity than they did in the UK. The difference is the UK is still trying to figure it out. I mean, they still haven't got the white paper out. They're still talking about restrictions. They're looking at restricting advertising. They're it just seems ponderous with those guys. Will
Well,
we have the same problems? Probably.
and
You know,
look what happened. The UK is a good example, because all those sports books, Victor, if people had just been coming in and betting on the soccer matches every week and walking out, maybe we don't. But what happened with those sports books was the speed of betting. They had once they had customers, they wanted them to stay. They wanted them to bet on other things. So now they're betting on, points in a tennis match. They're betting on, the first half of a soccer game. They're keeping them engaged for longer. It's not just something you bet on and then 3 hours later you get your results. They wanted them engaged, minute by minute, throughout the game. And we're already at that stage in America, and we're seeing the problems with it. Two more baseball
scandal a
pitchers.
day, man.
Yeah,
Scandal
two
a
more
day. How many
baseball
scandals
pitchers.
a days can you handle? You know what I mean? This one over the weekend was, and you saw the
Mhm.
footage. These guys were these guys were trying to kill gophers. You know, it was really ridiculous. I
Right.
don't watch sports, you know what I mean? But I will potentially peek my head in to see what's going on in that sports culture.
And that's
And
what's crazy about this, right? Is the athletes themselves that are allegedly engaged in this, the money made no difference to them. Like,
that
they're making
competitive spirit, man.
millions. But I think that's, they've got friends, they've got hangers-ons, they've got relatives that, hey, if I can kick them
They
10
got
grand somewhere.
sponsors, they got the
Right.
pictures in the tunnel, they got signs
Mhm.
all over the banners. And by the way, Pachanga is all over,
Right.
it too. So, we're part of it. The casinos are there too. So it isn't just sports betting, it's the culture of gambling.
So it's
You know what
hard
I
to
mean?
know why someone like the NHL would run out and sign up and partner with Kalshi.
Right.
And we've got a letter ready to go to our uh, tribes that advertise at NHL games, asking them, maybe you want to reconsider your partnership with the NHL and advertising at these stadiums, because they are partnered with a group that is an existential threat to your very business model on the reservation. So you might want to look at, advertising at Las Vegas Knights games, or Anaheim Ducks, or LA Kings.
But at some point it goes, oh, by the way, while you're looking at them, why don't you look at Prize Picks and Underdog too, while you're doing DFS Plus too?
Right.
So, and by the way, now we have Sweepstakes Plus, which was the new phrase over the weekend, which I guess that's going to look better on the tombstone than sweepstakes gambling,
Right.
was here, you
Right.
know. So
So I think your question of this court ruling raised a very good question. Was, do tribes still have exclusivity in the digital age? I mean,
that's the question, isn't
we
it?
probably need 2 or 3 sessions about that at our trade show.
With my
Uh,
therapist or with
oh,
this?
your therapist. But, uh, because, and I think that given the way IGRA is set up, that's a question for the states as well. And if you're renegotiating compacts anytime soon, or you already have exclusivity, you might want to go to your folks and say, do we still have exclusivity, state? What are you doing to stop all this CFTC nonsense and sweepstakes? And because otherwise, our customer base is being That's another thing. We say the customer base is going to ultimately shrink. I think right now, some of the established sports books will tell you they are not necessarily seeing any decrease in volume on like a Sunday football betting plate. But anecdotally, we know that the younger guys are the ones all into the prediction markets and that they can go in anytime during a game, after the game, even, in advance of next week and go find something that they want to bet on and bet on it. Now, you can't tell me that's not going to have a bad effect and a rolling effect for years down the line, the more and more this gets established. And I think the commercial guys are finally woken up to that, and they are going to start taking this threat more seriously. But again, it's a drip drip, and like you said, Victor, they're playing the long game. They're going to try to make as much money right now as they can, because they know inevitably some form of regulation will come down because they can't guarantee you. Notice they never talk about any kind of problem gambling or know your customer. They're not talking about any kind of regulatory issue. Now, what's one thing we can push the CFTC about is what are you doing to protect customers of these so-called prediction markets? You have a process in place for protecting farmers, getting their agricultural products out there, safeguarding. You saw some ridiculous op-ed pieces by former Congressman Colin Peterson, and extolling the virtues of the prediction markets for agriculture and everything. And I don't think that anyone bothered to tell Colin Peterson, probably because Kalshi was the one putting him up to it. But, it's not about agricultural products anymore. It's about sports betting. Here's a couple of their ads. But, they're out there already engaged, politically supporting Peggy Flanagan's primary opponent
Right.
in the race there.
Right. And they're maxed out too. And Sarah Slane's involved in there too. So it was Tariq and Lopes, Laura, and Sarah Slane all giving money to the candidate running against Peggy Flanagan. So if that isn't a big, sign, then I don't know what is.
Right.
So what, but look at, I think, one of the things that's really important here, and I think that you touched upon a very important issue, which is, do we have exclusivity on our land anymore in this new digital age? And if not, does the state that you live in have exclusivity for digital? Because it's the same question that's being asked. And I think the tribes need to work more in concert with the states. The California tribes have a really great relationship with the state of California. We have a governor that looks like he wants to be president. I think this is an issue that I think he would agree is something that, maybe we can make it a national issue. You know what I mean? I think the tribes also need to get involved, pushing with their states, pushing their attorney generals. We need to create more, working with more, creating these workshops so the tribes can know how to approach these, and legally and politically and using social media. And so this needs to be an all hands on deck. There are no vacations. This isn't Congress. We don't get a break. You know what I mean? We fight every single day until this thing is over, you know?
And I mean, Victor, and we apologize to our listeners today. I hope, it's just going to be us because,
Sorry, guys.
there's we wanted the litigators to come on, but there's an amicus brief due in the Southern District of Ohio. That's coming up. And then another amicus due in the Nevada case, coming up right before Thanksgiving or around Thanksgiving. So, these things are moving, and Indian country is going to be involved. But I think the next part of that is we've got to start being more direct with our tribal leaders and everyone. Look, we got this decision in California in the Northern District. Okay, the case might not be ripe enough yet. We just need more evidence of them intruding on Indian lands. So that's one thing.
I think,
Second,
the Wampanoags in Massachusetts, you know what I mean? You're already seeing Massachusetts has got the case back into the state courts. They were trying to pull it out states and move it into federal courts, and Massachusetts has been successful. You know
right.
what I mean? And so, maybe there's an angle there. I think we have to look at all possible angles. And, Val Spicer said, do we need to incorporate a strong technology poison pill language in our compacts?
Yeah.
That's the deal. This is a different battlefield. This has nothing to do with compacts, and this has to do more with states' rights than tribal rights,
Mhm. And
And
and that's what I was going to build towards is what Valerie asked about the poison pill, because we've got a letter, as important as these amicus briefs are, it was cited positively in the Maryland case. We're not going to win this thing on an amicus brief. It's not going to stop this. And it comes down to these states that are prosecuting this thing. And so to the extent if you're negotiating new compacts or want to putting a poison pill for technology in there, that does one of the things IGRA did was set up a system that was more open-ended on the technology side. And tribes have used that for, ticket in, ticket out, for the expansion of class 2 bingo to not just your grandma's bingo. We've used these technology provisions ourselves to, make the industry better. But we never didn't call, we didn't try to lie and say it's not gambling at some point. But so putting a poison pill in, plus the game these guys play, it's like you put a poison pill in there, they'll just say, "Oh no, that's not what we are. We're this."
look at
I mean,
sweepstakes. And after we did that in California, they're talking about triple coin. We got rid of double coin. Now they're going, we're going to do triple, quadruple coin. So there's always
right.
some,
The semantic game won't
right,
end with a poison pill.
right.
Uh, and in fact, they're like, you specifically said this, and we're not that, so therefore it doesn't apply. That's where it starts to get just the silliness never will end. And frankly, right now, until we can get the courts, I'm telling you, the short-sightedness of all these prediction market folks is stunning. But like you said, it's mostly just a cash grab. But as more and more people get harmed from this, parents will complain, "Hey, my kid is at college and he's spending all his money on these prediction markets." The parents won't even understand it. They'll just be screaming and yelling at their
It's so
console.
cliche how this thing is going to go through, man. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
it's it's so cliche, and in the sense is that, and very sad too, because it's real lives being involved and loss
I,
and families and homes and all these terrible things that
I mean,
we're trying
we
to
could sit
avoid.
down. I mean, I think, you worry about telegraphing anything to these prediction markets, but
Right.
again, they're so arrogant, it might not matter. But,
Oh, they
their
don't give a shit.
disclosure statements are laughable. And I think that's going to be a big part of some of the undoing here is the way they've disclosed stuff to their customers. And at some point, the customers will be harmed. Now that's a problem because you have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is being dismantled as we speak. Where are you going to go and complain at the federal level for some kind of redress if you're an aggrieved customer using these prediction markets? Are you going to write a letter to the CFTC? You're going to go through whatever process these prediction markets are, binding you to when you deposit money with them. It's a rigged game right now. There is no independent oversight. And that's good for them to make a bunch of money right now. But like you said, it is a cliche. It's going to catch up with them, and they're going to piss off enough customers and the parents of those customers, the spouses of those customers, the children of those customers, because they can't even, uh, you know, they have no way of age verification. It's kind of a joke. So, and they made the decision, oh, 18 years old is, that's old enough to bet on this. Whereas we have an established, uh, decades long, we know that kids even 18 to 25 are still not, they still are impulsive and reactionary, and they don't stop and think. So that's why it's 21 at the casinos and on Indian reservations. But right now, I think, Victor, where our messaging to tribes and tribal leaders is, we're working hard as we can, and now we're doing more with the commercial side of the aisle to raise this level. But until we get somebody at the federal agency to start taking this more seriously and looking at what's really going on, which, the hearing is next week for the new CFTC nominee from President Trump, Mr. Seelig. And it's next Wednesday, so they clearly are rushing this before Thanksgiving. It's just the hearing. It won't even be a committee vote, but probably they'll come back after Thanksgiving, maybe do a committee vote and get this person in there onto the Senate floor for confirmation as quickly as possible. At that point, it's going to be his baby to take care of. And I think you'll start, now that they have an acting commissioner, you might see the CFTC dragged into this more, which is not what these prediction markets want. Kalshi doesn't want the CFTC to be involved in litigation or anything like that, because at that point, the CFTC can't go along with what, I don't want to call it a joke, but they can't go along with the reality that the prediction markets are operating in, because they know it's just untrue, and they'll be ripped apart in court by a judge. And also the CFTC's got to clean up its own regulations. At some point, people are going to be looking, oh, you say you're regulating these things. Where's the regulation? What are the standards they're supposed to be adhering to? What other kind of contracts are like this, that allow 18-year-olds to gamble on sports? What is there something similar like that in the agricultural part of your mandate? So, they won't hold up under scrutiny. Again, what's the time frame when we get to that point? Is it middle of next year? Is it 2027? That's what we've got to just be open and explaining to our tribal interests here, our tribal gaming operations. Sorry. We tried to do that at the beginning, Victor, when this came out in February, came out of the blue in February with that silly notice they sent out, which is not even the way you're supposed to do things under the Administrative Procedures Act. Well, that law has basically been nullified by DOJ and everyone else. They're just going to do what they want to these agencies. And we tried to tell folks when we were at CNIGA, okay, well, Trump Jr. is on the board of Kalshi at the time, and they're just gutting the CFTC. It looks like kind of a rigged game at this point. And, it was hard to get people to wrap their heads around, what do you mean a rigged game? They can't just come out and start offering sports betting on. It's like, well, yes, they are. And yes, they will. And then they cancel the roundtable. More and more companies are getting into this. They're buying Trump's meme coins, ingratiating themselves with the new administration. And
well, the Winklevosses, I mean, if they wouldn't have got involved, they would have knocked out the nominee. Now they made an announcement the other day that they're getting into prediction markets also. So again, like I get that quote earlier, the finance is moving into gambling faster than gambling is moving into finance. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's the next big shiny thing. They need to make those numbers, and that's why they're all investing it. But we have a question here, Ron.
Oh, okay.
And Ron, thank you, and everyone, and whoever did the anonymous. We don't answer anonymous questions, so but we appreciate you when you put your name there because you like having a conversation. Ron said, uh, he says we're focusing on sports and events only in our discussions. We should be looking at the larger picture. Providers such as Kalshi has a huge advantage over brick and mortar sportsbooks because of the vast array of offerings that are able to provide to Wisconsin residents. Tribally operated sportsbooks can only offer sports per current legislation compact. Kalshi is able to offer everything under the sun, whereas the tribe's exclusivity. Ron, the bigger question here and what you're talking about, and the bigger issue is if you're not online, you can't compete. And if you don't have a product online, you can't compete. What are you doing? Where are you? You know what I mean? You're trying to drag the sun down from the sky. You want to bring the clouds down so that you can fight them. You have to be in the sky to fight. You know what I mean? And if you're not online, if you don't have an online product, this is why we're getting our lunch eaten. You know what I mean? You can't wait for it. And they're not waiting for you. And the system has never been fair, and it's never been built to make it fair for us. So we have to fight every single way. So Ron, the answer to your question is where exclusivity is, where are the tribes? If you're not online offering a product, then you're not in the fight. You know what I mean? Now, what was interesting to me was with Judge Corsley, right? Judge Corsley, that was her name. She did point out the fact that, she didn't have a voice in this because it was the CFTC that decided what it was going to do. And even though there was only one person operating as a star chamber, you know what I mean? And that there is no other members and there is no vote, and it's rigged so that only one person the vote decides what the industry is going to be. And they knew that. They saw the opportunity. Somebody did their white paper somewhere. They saw it, and that's what happened here. Whether it was the kid from Polymarket, I know it wasn't Kalshi. Let's be honest that these guys
Right.
didn't invent this. They didn't invent anything.
Right. Right.
So um, that's the even the judge knows that. Listen, my hands are tied. You know what I mean? Either legally, I can't do anything. The CFTC is going to decide what they're going to self-certify, and they say they can do it on Indian reservations. It's done. My hands are tied.
Well, exactly, Victor. And that's that's what happens when you have uh, a captured regulatory agency.
Captured. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that's part of the problem with explaining this to again a lot of our folks is we're dealing with the CFTC that is going to let this happen no matter what until they're
Right.
told not to. Now, whether that's Congress or the courts, that's where our battle is right now, is
Well,
trying
and
to get
that's the
one of
other
them.
thing. Congress isn't doing anything. They're so
Right.
worried. First of all, they've been out for what, a month, and they're coming back. You got air traffic controllers. Meanwhile, money's going out of the flying out of the wallet.
Well,
You know what I
and
mean?
that gets to Richard Chisso's question on here about, they're rapidly expanding much more than you know, tribal gaming is or gambling across the country in general. And at what point do they become too big to knock down? And to that, I would say there are examples, admittedly few, but there are examples in our history where major industries have been forced to disgorge profits or shut down operations. Some of those were in times of national emergencies, whether World War II or the Civil War, but there's also more recent indications that it's not unprecedented. And the thing is to get that building of pressure around these prediction markets and to get again the agricultural community has got to start weighing in on this and saying, what the heck is the CFTC engaged in? You're supposed to be protecting farmers and agriculture in this country, and this is where you're headed. And I don't think that they'd get too big to knock down, because
No.
as soon as a judge and as soon as Congress wants to acknowledge this is gambling, this is nothing more than gambling, and we are going to stop it, and states are going to be allowed to have their providence. And that's where the Supreme Court they've already ruled several times in the past that gambling is a state sovereignty issue. So how are they going to overcome that argument? They may have to declare the whole Commodities Exchange Act, unless it gets amended, unconstitutional if it's allowing gambling to occur in states that don't want it to be in their state. They did that with PAPSA. I mean, so I wouldn't lose hope there. But
No, I wouldn't either. And also, I mean, look at all
oh,
the
Richard
lawsuits
came
that.
up with his own.
Yeah.
Look at
Well,
Napster.
well,
Yeah,
well,
there's
well,
one.
you know what? Listen. I would have went to American Standard or something like that when they broke up the monopoly of the oil companies and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But these guys aren't too big because first of all, they're not adding value to society. This isn't the steel mills. This isn't the railroads. This isn't mining. This is
Right.
gambling. And when it comes down, it's all going to come down to a states' right issue. Do the states have a right to control gambling in their own states? And especially see all the gambling people moving into it. So, they're losing the argument of, this is a financial a deal. This is gambling. This is the gambling industry. You got all these people moving into it. And I think it's a matter of time before we get to the Supreme Court, when we get there, but it's going to be a states' right issue. It's not going to be a tribal issue,
Mhm.
and we have to do everything we can to help that and help move that along,
Mhm.
you know. How we do it, I don't know. That's not, as we all know, I don't watch sports. I'm not a lawyer. I'm
Right.
just trying to do everything I can to make sure the tribes have a fighting chance.
Just go back to that one other question. I forget who it was, but just asking about, well, Ron's question about they're offering so much and they have this big sweet menu of choices of what you can gamble on. And I would just you can go to any one of their websites and show anyone you know who's betting on there. Just say, look at some of the stuff they're offering. It's just pure nonsense, pure, utter, adulterated nonsense. To your point, Victor, it's not contributing anything to society, other than potentially creating more scandals.
Right.
And I just don't know how certain senators and Congress people can just wave it off and be like, oh, it's not a big deal. I know the senator from Oklahoma has been out there telling me it's not a big deal. I don't see a problem with it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, well, then do you need your glasses? I mean, do you need to look harder? Because the problems are forming right under your feet.
Listen, the sports betting plan of 50 scandals in 50 states is moving along just fine. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're moving along just fine.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's a matter, and this doesn't exist in a vacuum, and the same
Right.
thing that happened in the UK, if you take that, and some of the other places in Europe and stuff like that, it's just they've gone over the top and the states are trying to reel them back in. Right now, nobody's at the wheel in Congress, nobody's at the wheel at the CFTC, and everybody's taking advantage of, this is they're crawling through the windows again and crawling up the walls, and but eventually they will be stopped. You know what I mean? And again, eventually we might have to talk about if they aren't. You know what I mean? I just find it hard to believe that they're going to allow these bureaucrats from Washington, D.C. to override states' rights, especially what PAPSA was about states' rights. You know what I mean? Now the states can't decide, And by the way, again, look at all the lawsuits that are coming after sweepstakes now. People are waking up to this threat of gambling. Utah, I think Dan Wallach was saying, 9, 10 lawsuits in the last week. I think at one point we had them in 48 hours or something like that. So, the work that we did with all of us in the sweepstakes is starting to pay off. And I think if we keep focused on the end game here, that we'll have the same result. But again, it's going to be states' rights. And, we got to do whatever we can to help. I think it's very important that, the tribes are paying attention, that we have unity, that, we create this, I know there's several working groups out there, and I think that's very important. And that we keep our brain trust, focused, our powder dry, and keep fighting, you know?
Right, Victor. And the main thing is, that's another thing. You talk about the bureaucrats and everybody was, there's a revolt against the deep state and bureaucrats, this and that. But look what happened at the CFTC. There was never any discussion amongst the commissioners. Oh, let's just now allow this. Whereas for years, they had dialogue back and forth. Quintenz is writing a treatise about why, he thinks that they should be allowed. At least he put thoughts to paper and then we could read it and, evaluate it. But then the whole commission gets gutted and the acting chairperson sends out a one-page memo, saying we are going to allow this because it's innovative and the previous administration, was too dim-witted to see the future. And now we're going to allow this. And that's all it was. And meanwhile, they still have regulations sitting on the books preventing it, saying
Right.
it's not supposed to be allowed. They couldn't even have the time to go through and revamp their regulations because they didn't want to do 90 days notice and all of that stuff. It's easier just to do the OMB thing of just forget it. It's all crap. We're just going to plow through and discard it. Somebody could sue us and try to stop us. That's the way the federal bureaucracy is working right now. They want to gut the bureaucracy. So
listen, the first thing this administration did in January was create a meme coin. You know what I mean? And not even the budget, but a meme coin. So, that's where we are at this time in history. You know what I mean? And you have to recognize what you're dealing with. And if you're going to, be effective, you have to understand what you're dealing with.
Well, Victor,
You're a soldier, Jason. Are you going to fight in water? Are you going to fight in sand? Are you going to fight in the jungle? How are you going to fight?
exactly. Unfortunately on this one, you can throw in the A,
Swamp. We're fighting in a swamp,
right?
by the way.
It's prediction because, and that's another thing we've got to let people know. Okay, prediction markets are just this shiny vehicle right now, but what's really behind it?
Driving this. Right.
It's crypto and
Right.
it's AI
Absolutely.
and it's data centers
Right.
and it's really this
Bubble.
notion.
It's a
Yeah,
bubble. Get
yeah,
in the
this whole
bubble, make
notion.
the money, move into the next bubble. You
Right.
know, how many bubbles do we have to see?
Mhm.
Housing, now the
Well,
AI bubble, the
well,
housing bubble, the dot-com bubble, you
the
know,
data center thing is really interesting because if you're like in Virginia, they had those elections 2 weeks ago,
right?
and
Your home state.
yeah, it was resounding victory for Democrats, and now they have a super majority in their House of Delegates. They got all branches of power. But one of the things nobody talked about was there were a lot of political advertisements and people accusing the other side of promoting data centers. You can't believe how unpopular data centers are all of a sudden. And if you're in Indiana and some of these other states that have massive data centers investments, it goes back to what Richard say. Are data centers too big? I mean, I feel like it's going to be like Frankenstein. People are going to take pitchforks
No, you
and
miss the
go
big
burn those
picture.
things
You
down because they
listen,
can't
you
stand them.
use
Yeah.
all that fallow farmland to build data centers. That's
Yeah.
what you do. So Iowa, all those farmers are going to be building, they're going to be moving, cat cables
Uh,
from one thing. That's going to put all those farmers to work in data
well,
centers. That's the plan.
that's the plan. But I think, the people in Virginia that are already living with it are like, holy moly, this sucks. It's
Yeah.
noisy. Our electric bills went up for no reason other than all the energy is being sucked over to the data center. I used to be able to sit out on a clear night and enjoy the stars, and now I hear a hum in the back of my head, and you
Wow.
know,
Wow.
it's affecting the animals, the domesticated animals that they have. They get a tension or nervousness or something from that constant
Yeah,
hum
sure,
you hear.
sure,
So
sure.
it's we're like you said, we're fighting bubbles here. But Victor, when have we ever been smart enough to just slow everything down and sort of rein it in? It's like
You're talking
everything
about
has to go.
humanity, not you and I, right?
Well, okay.
We're talking about you and
I
I,
was talking
right?
about the United States. It's like, the railroad expansion, you can see that was coming to a bust end. We can see where it's going to all end up. Uh, and yeah, and here's Congress just doubling down, passing looser restrictions on crypto, saying to the CFTC and SEC, you guys regulate this and tell us so you want to get rid of the deep state on the one hand, but then you want to empower a bunch of bureaucrats to just let all this stuff happen left and right, willy-nilly.
I'm starting to think they're not that deep. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
I'm starting to think they're not that deep. I've
No,
been watching, you know what I mean?
right, right.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's it's just a weird time right now. And the sad thing is when this all goes bust, how bad is it going to be? Is it just going to be a great recession? We're out of it in 1 or 2 years, or is it going to be a decades long Great Depression like the 30s were? And I don't know. I mean, it's such a fraught time, and we've got to focus on our tribal gaming brick and mortar, who you spent a lifetime developing your customer base, locally. The model was definitely different than what Jersey and Nevada had been offering. Ours was a much more hometown, you know, being friendly with your neighbors type deal. And I still think there's room. There's always room for that, right, Victor? Even if they
Yeah.
start getting online gaming just within the reservation or cut deals with the state to have it all in state, geofenced within the state, uh, you're still going to want to go to the reservation, to the casino next door, as opposed to flying
Listen,
around.
I've been married forever now. So, I missed all the dating apps and all that stuff too. But it just seems like, everybody thinks your lives are going to be in digital, and you realize that it's so hollow and shallow, and that you need that human contact. And the
Right.
casinos are still about, I went to Pachunga this weekend with dinner with my family, and with the entertainment and the stuff like that. So you have to become,
Mhm.
these spaces that people want to visit, you know what I mean? And you could do the slots and box, and there's a space for that too. But these guys are just going for pure gambling. You know what I mean? I think when you tie it to sports, you got that entertainment, but now sports is starting to freak out with these, again, 50 scandals in 50 states in 50 days. You
Right.
know what I mean? Incredible strategy. I would have thought of that. You know what I mean? But I think at the bottom line is, and as I had a discussion online with Jeremy Kuden, that I believe that this thing is going to come to, you're going to get these big scandals where people just can't ignore it anymore, and the industry just can't blow past it anymore. And that's what happens. It's happening out in the UK. It's happening in I always remind people that when we met with Flutter in Dublin,
Mhm.
I asked one of them, I go, by the way, they mentioned that they own Paddy Power, and I was like, by the way, who's the one that okayed sending Dennis Rodman into South Korea for basketball diplomacy, and that was all paid for by Paddy Power. You know what I mean? And by the way, they gave me the name and somebody I know too.
Right.
And but that is what they do, whatever you got to do. And here they are dealing, sending Dennis Rodman to North Korea,
Mhm.
you know,
Right. Right.
and which that's great. And by the way, yesterday's news, Andrew Tate is teaming up to open up a crypto casino.
Oh,
So
nice.
everybody's coming into it. It's the Wild West. I think eventually that's what you're looking at when a lot of these bad characters, and I'm sure that Kalshi and Polymarket are going, no, 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 no. The Jeffrey Epstein prediction market. So that's only a matter of time.
Right. Well, so again, Victor, we're not going to let go of this issue anytime
No,
soon. We're going to be
we're
in
not going
Seattle
anywhere.
next week with NCI. NIGC is coming out to talk to tribes. We're going to be pushing this issue right in front of tribal leaders, getting them to sign a couple of petitions to send to Congress. Not against the nominee, we're taking a more expansive approach now to just send. We need a constant drumbeat, like you said, of letters into Congress explaining to them the pitfalls of this whole scheme, and that way, at some point, we're going to not have congressional leaders just wave it off as I don't see a problem, or I don't really know about that yet. We're still looking into it. I mean, they've been saying that for 8 months now, and it's a willful ignorance type thing because if you're a Republican, you don't want to go against what Trump and them are doing, and
But
you
in a
want to
way, how
avoid
many
it.
crises can you handle? You know what I mean? How many crises can you handle? You got farmers, killing themselves in Iowa. You got people that don't get their SNAP benefits that are starving all across the country, and scandal upon scandal and scandal, and they're not including the Jeffrey Epstein stuff that dropped today. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
So, how much can you handle? And I think that's part of it is just saturate the social media with scandals that everything gets lost, and that the important things get lost with the things that aren't important,
Mhm.
the frivolous things. And that's kind of where we are with the society. I thought the internet was going to be a place where we could find truth. Little did I know that it would be a place to hide truth
Right.
you know
You can just wrap yourself in your own little world and find the facts that you need
right,
to support.
alternative facts,
Right,
remember.
right. And find other people that, believe nonsense. So,
Yeah, yeah. Hey,
uh,
we have an anonymous thing here, and I usually don't answer them, but it's
uh,
actually a good one, which was, can you explain what you think is the most likely
yeah,
path to the Supreme
that,
Court?
that's for our litigators. I was a litigator 20 years ago, but, um, it's a circuitous path to the Supreme Court because we have this Third Circuit appeal right now. Um, if that doesn't go well, if they rule against New Jersey, uh, I don't know that we necessarily want that one to be brought right to the Supreme Court because the questions in that are much more straightforward legal question without a development of a record yet. That's why the Nevada case seems to be proceeding along the way you would think a case proceeds with you have two parties uh, against each other. You get discovery, you collect evidence, you present your arguments, the whole shebang. Whereas these preliminary cases, a lot of times they're just on, very narrow legal questions, and that's not necessarily what we want to go to the Supreme Court. We want to know what's going. At some point, Kalshi, Polymarket, all these guys are going to have to tell us what is actually behind the prediction market. Do you have guarantors? fronting up the money to
Is it peer
go
to
bet.
peer, as you say? Is it
Yeah. Again, the structure, they can sit around and say whatever the structure is, but then they have to prove it and they have to show us. And that's where they'll fall short, is on the evidentiary collection aspect of all these cases.
and they're doing everything they can to stay
Mhm.
out. I mean, you saw Polymarket say, okay, listen, we're going to stay out of Nevada until this is done. You see Kalshi is pushing back, saying they don't want to go. I think one of the big ones, again, we go back in a Massachusetts where
Mhm.
they're bringing them back into state's court, and everything that I'm reading, it says that's where we want to go, but to answer is that it's a slog getting there. And I think Jason brings up a really great point, is have to have the right case going up there. You don't
Right.
want to have it narrowly defined where we're still fighting them. We want to get, and that's where we need to be in supporting and help pushing the right lawsuits, and supporting wherever we can, however we can, you know
Right. So we're gonna, we'll load up again next week. I don't know, Victor. We're gonna next week's really busy.
we're going to
Back
be at National Congress of American
Right.
Indians. And we're going to be taking our road show over there,
Mhm.
talking to the tribes and bringing awareness and stuff like that. And we're going to try to be on next Wednesday. Uh, we'll see. I think we'll
Yeah,
be running right
if
up to
we
it.
can get some good guests, let's do it. Generally should be with the time change and everything, it'll only be about 10 a.m. out there, so it should be
Right,
relatively
my
quick.
time, same for
Yeah.
me. So, yeah,
So,
and we could do it in our hotel rooms or something
right.
like that. Yeah.
And but yeah, we're gonna keep up this drumbeat. And thanks for everyone that keeps tuning in, because
Yeah, we really
we
appreciate everyone.
the word of mouth that the attendees on here generate, I hear it, and then people share the recording, and so we're not going to stop that anytime soon. We're trying to just get a little bit more of a drumbeat message to Congress, and also a little more sophisticated and straightforward messaging to our tribal leaders. Maybe at the very beginning we were just sounding the alarm bells, Victor, and everyone just thought it would be, oh, well, we'll do what we did in the past. We'll flood the agency with concerns, demand consultation, talk to our congressional folks, and we'll at least hold this up. They can't just roll it out. But guess what? They just rolled it out and it's up and functioning. And now what? And then now the president has his own company getting involved in it. So these are definitely a different time and a different strategy. And but I think ultimately the facts are on our side, and the best advertisement against this are those companies' own front page websites. Just log on to Kalshi, and you can pick out within 5 seconds 5 bets that are just so stupid and inane. You're like, what are we doing? Like, why does anyone need to bet on this? So ultimately we'll get there, but we just got to keep our nose to the grindstone right now. So
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're not going to stop. We will keep doing this, and then we're just starting to work on. I got our show in San Diego in March and April, and so this will be front and center, and we will use those as work groups and starting to get everybody focused and pointed in the right direction. And
right.
this is not something where like Jason and I said, we've been focusing on this now for over a year. Sweepstakes moving right into this one, and we have no intention of stopping it. And you bring up something really important about our viewers and listeners and how important they are. Um, you guys are out there spreading the message. You guys are out talking to the tribes. You're sending, we see it in the numbers. They've been growing and growing, and we really, really appreciate that. We don't do this for viewership. We do it just to get the message out. And we've always,
Information. Right.
by the way, Jason, we are now going into 5 years that we've been doing this, which is
Really?
pretty insane. Yeah, we're like at
Yeah.
140,
Hmm.
150 videos
Okay.
or shows that we've done in the
Doesn't feel
last.
like it. Wow. When does the honeymoon phase end? Sixth year?
I don't know, man. It's
Okay.
always feels, so. But listen, so okay, we're going to work on the agenda. We're going to try to get you guys on next Wednesday. I think we might be talking about Wisconsin again. I think that's where the action is.
Right.
It's very important that the tribes are, focus. I think we need to go back to Minnesota now that you see Kalshi involved in Minnesota. I think that tells you a lot about where their priorities are.
Mhm.
So, like it's not the first time we fought Wall Street. It's not the first time we fought these guys and these people, and it won't be the last time, But the thing is that you always fight, you never back down, you
Right.
know. So,
Exactly. So,
our
well, we thank
our
you all.
ancestors would be proud of us, Jason.
I hope.
I
Uh,
hope so too.
uh, at least right now, our lives aren't at risk, but uh,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
we have a lot more resources than our ancestors did, and a lot more brain power to lean on. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we appreciate everyone signing in again, and like Victor said, we'll see you next week. Hopefully,
We'll
get
be
some
there.
guests on, and then get into Thanksgiving, and then through the holidays. So,
Yep. All right, everyone. Thank you
okay,
very
thank you
much
so much.
thanks for the great questions. You guys had some really
Yes,
great questions, and we really appreciate that. It makes it a much more deeper, more profound experience for all of us. Again, thanks everyone, and we'll see you guys next week. We
thank
appreciate
you
you.
all. Thank you.
Bye.